Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to our latest edition of Adeptus On-Air, and we have the great and terrific David Kenner on. Very special guest, Richard Goldstein, actually knows you very well. He may join us later. We'll see. But either way, David, I just want to just commend you, first of all, for all the great work that you're doing with the youth. And as a person that works with the youth myself, I know how important that is, and just making the world a better place. So let's get started. Just kind of break it down in terms of counseling for schools. What is the project about? What is the mission? And how long have you been doing it?
Well, I'm very fresh with it, James. I just got back from a high school in Brooklyn, and it really speaks to exactly what the idea is. Because whether you've been doing this work currently under the current circumstances, which is fraught with all kinds of divisive ideas of violence and media and insecurities and all that. That's all true. And yet let's get back to basics. Kids are kids. Young people are young people. They want to be loved. They want to be held. They want to know that their people around them are trustworthy. So you build relationships, and that goes across the board for as many decades as I've been doing it, and probably you as well. So that's the idea. The organization is called Counseling in Schools. And the nature and the most important part of that is that we're in school. So where do kids spend most of their time? In school. Correct. And so we're in their lives, and that's how you build trust. And you don't just jump in, you stay there for as long as you can. And that's the same idea. I started with this organization a good 11, 12 years ago when Hurricane Sandy hit New York. The federal government launched something called Project Hope, that I was appointed director of, and we went into the schools throughout the areas hardest hit by the storm, and we had to sort of take the government to school ourselves because they wanted that program to be a crisis response program, meaning go in, take care of everything quickly, and get out, and just assess what's going on. And if they need some, resources, give it to them and refer them. And so it was a great program that way, but they didn't quite understand the nature of education and the nature of young people. You can't just go in for a minute or a day or a week. You got to stay because they don't trust you right away. They shouldn't trust you right away. We adults don't give them enough information to trust them right away or for them to trust us right away. You have to build that. So we were able to take a program that they did, was called Skills for Psychological Recovery, and we molded it. And I had a big hand in this because my background is arts education. So starting out as an actor and a theater person, and subsequently a screenwriter and producer, the understanding of the arts, particularly dramatic arts and theater arts, in education is a very, very powerful tool because there are a lot of techniques in that world that kids naturally gravitate towards. Young people are particularly ready to role play. They love to draw. They love to dance. They love to write. They love to sing. They love to move. It's pretty much what age do we as adults say, stop that, stop being creative and get busy, get serious, and put those imaginations down. And I'm like, no, don't ever stop. Don't ever put those down. Let's just find the right avenue so we can apply a little bit here and a little bit there. And in fact, years ago, they launched something called STEM, which is, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I was on one of the first committees that said, could you put a little A in there and throw some STEAM in there and put the arts into the conversation?
Exactly.
And one of the interesting things that has developed over the years in counseling in schools does this very well is that, you don't have to do one thing to earn something else. In other words, like if you if you get counseling, you might do better in math. That's the misnomer. Yeah, that might happen, but why don't you just get yourself socially and emotionally engaged for the sake of its own,
Benefit.
reward?
Yep.
Then the math or the attendance, all that which we are so obsessed with, that'll come. You have to
Yep.
trust that it'll come because kids will want to be with you. They will want to engage. They'll want to join. So the organization is 35 years old or so, and it's been sending social workers, mental health professionals, and uniquely art therapists, music therapists, drama therapists, dance and movement therapists into the school. And we really, the name is counseling in schools, and post COVID, counseling has taken a little less of the hit that it used to, like the taboo, like I ain't going to counseling, ain't nothing wrong with me, versus, the approach here is healing centered engagement. And there is the famous Dr. Richard. How are you, sir?
I am well. How is everybody this evening?
We're
Doing
great.
great.
We're
Doing
regaling.
great.
I'm regaling James with some of your major accomplishments by being my friend.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. You actually joined in while we're live recording, um, so all good. I didn't want to interrupt your thought, David, on the you were
So yeah,
explaining
well,
what.
anyway, the idea being that counseling in schools, we're in like 90 or so sites across the city, and it's the idea that, like I said, counseling is less so of the taboo that it was maybe within the last few years post COVID, but it's much more of the perspective of a healing centered approach. There was a big phrase floating around education for a long time, still very popular, and everyone wants to be trauma informed.
Mm,
In other words, we're in trauma, and so you have to know that we are all traumatized in some way, and frankly, we are. To an extent, everyone has had their traumas, whether it's family, interpersonal, whatever those issues are. But the idea that you don't start from a counseling approach. You don't start from a trauma approach. You start from a healing approach. If you're going to
yes.
school, I don't want to go to a trauma center. I want to go to a healing center. And a
Good point.
healing centered approach means you know where you came from. And I don't mean just like, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, which I was, but like, what land are we standing on here? I mean, where my feet are on the ground? Well, who was here before me? Was it, the Lenape in this area? And so we talked about that today in class. Like, okay, the Lenape were in the Bronx. Okay, so, and then who owned why is it called the Bronx? Because there was a cat named Bronx and he had a farm and it was the Bronx's farm. So
Yeah.
once you start understanding where you're coming from, then we can talk about where we are now, and then we can approach where we want to go. And that
Love it.
doesn't, so in education, K through 12, everyone just wants to push the kids to the cap and gown day and then be gone.
Yep.
And the recidivism rate of graduation is pretty dire. So
Wow.
the idea is, what's the bigger picture of this whole idea? Where do we as young people, wherever we are, where do we fit into the whole scheme of things, and where do we find purpose and meaning? And that's the whole idea. So there you
I
have it.
love it. I love it. And as a person that has a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old who is just getting into the school system,
Mm.
those are things that are concerning to me, because the school system has kind of stayed the same for the last 100 years, it seems like, and there hasn't been too many disruptions or ways of thinking creatively and doing things different. So I love that you all are going in and doing those things.
Here's my tip to a young parent.
Yes, I'm
People do
listening.
this is really very simple. Often people will say, "Well, I called the school, and the school said." You didn't call the school, you talked to a person. You didn't call the accountant, you called Richard. You've got to talk to a human being who you know, and who you know their voice, you know their cadence, you know their likes. If you engage on a personal basis, everything changes. Get a first name, make a friend, they will do anything for you. If you treat it
Yeah.
like the Board of Education, the school, the industry, it'll eat you up. So,
Wow.
and kids do the same. When your kid gets to the playground, what's the first thing that they do? They run up to someone, they hug an individual kid. They don't hug every kid. They don't
Yeah.
hug the playground. So that's a natural inclination that I think is really helpful for all ways of living and of breathing, and especially in the settings we're talking about.
It's great advice. Great advice. I definitely take note of that. And yeah, I'm at the beginning stage, so kindergarten. So I'm taking in all advice that I can get. Um,
It's a great age. And, I envy you, applaud you, and wish you well.
No, appreciate that very much, and I'll dig more into the counseling in schools. But while Richard is here, what is the genesis of your friendship and work relationship? Where did it all start? I don't know who wants to start and explain it, but since you're both here, someone take the mic and tell me how you all became got to know each other.
Shall I start, Richard? Or do you want to go?
I'll start.
All right.
So it was literally 5 years ago. I got a call from an agent, and the agent said, one of my clients is looking for an accountant. And this agent, I've been working with one of her clients for 30 years now. So I said, sure, absolutely. Thanks for the referral. I appreciate it. So I don't know if I called David or if David called me. And we were maybe 30 seconds into the conversation, and he starts doing his shtick. And I'm choking for air. And I said, I have to meet this guy. And as it turns out, the office where I was, David was literally across the street. He was on the other side of 8th Avenue.
Wow.
And he was in my office in like 20 minutes. And we sat and we talked, and I laughed for 2 hours. And I
Wow.
told him about what we do and what he should do. And when I say he, it was regarding his wife, who's a very gifted and highly acclaimed costume designer. And I was telling him, based upon the changes, what they needed to do in order to be able to take advantage of certain aspects of the tax law. And next thing I know, we're working together. And the whole time, I mean, every single time, it's like there's like a routine. I don't know if I'm sitting with David Kenner, Myron Cohen, or Jack Benny. And and I got to tell you something. For me, that's fantastic because um, I know what we do, the services that we offer to our clients,
Mhm.
but when it is this kind of fun, it's unbelievable. And then as I got to know David and know what he does, um, I was in a bit of a pickle because the former firm that I was at didn't want to support any causes unless it was one specific cause that was near and dear to the CEO of the firm. And if it wasn't that, then nobody wanted to hear about it. And I felt badly because I really wanted to support what David did. So fast forward 3 years later, David and I we're working and laughing, and I don't know what we do more of. I think it's laugh. And we got he said, I'm doing this program. Do you want to join? And I went to Howard, and Howard is such a generous,
She is.
um, upbeat person. He was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's get a table," and we did. And then we did it again this year. And the best part of the evening is I have a friend who's the head of the bass department at the Berklee College of Music. And I'm sending videos of these two guys who are legends. And he knows these guys. And the award winner from last year, my friend was on the phone with him earlier in the day. It was hysterical. And but the best part of the evening, I got to meet David's mother.
Mm.
And um, when I heard the story, talking to his mother was a trip. There's no other way to describe it. What is she, David? Late 80s?
Yeah.
She's got more energy than I could ever think of having. It's unbelievable. Her faculties are in order, and it was just incredible. It was a great experience. But in after the cocktail hour, there was this awards presentation, and then some testimonials about what this program does. And, we were just talking about being a parent. Now, I've been a parent for almost 23 years. And the way it has changed my perspective and softened my heart is indescribable. But when I saw what these folks are doing for these kids, and I'm going to say that they're less advantaged. I'm lucky to have raised my kids in a pretty affluent suburb, so they're never wanting for anything. But these kids have so little, and in some cases, nothing. And what this program is doing, it's like, I can't believe this. The work that I do for David and Michelle, I know what good it's doing for them, but what I see that David is doing and the people that he works with for these kids, I mean, it's indescribable. I mean, I got all teary eyed when I was watching these testimonials, and my colleague Michael Elam, who was with me, I mean, the both of us, we were like slobbering messes because it was just that beautiful and that touching. And I got to tell you something. I want to get the word out. I want other people to support this. Yes. Because unfortunately, in this day and age of budgetary cuts, the city ain't going to support it.
So wait, all right. I love you, dude, so much. So I'm going to go right back where you're starting and go back just a little bit. Okay, so one of the things that when you're doing the work, and you will understand this because of the richness of the way you even live, whether it's through food or family, the kids that we do are very rich in culture, in story, in song. And we go in there. If we go in, oh, you poor kids, done, finished, they can't hear me. Now, are you 100% right that they're disadvantaged? Absolutely. That the little bit goes a long way, of course. But that's a kind of a cultural shift that I think we are making together, that you approach this from a strengths-based approach. And the same thing, like what are we doing with my wife as a costume designer? Sometimes she and I have these conversations. She's a costume designer for a major TV show, and it doesn't compare, David, to what you're doing with the kids. Your work is so much. I said, wait, whoa. How about the entertainment that you're providing to the world who watches these shows, that when I want to slow down in the evening or look forward to something? So everyone's work, your work, Richard, with me, with her, is vital to our ability to do all of this. So I'm not trying to put everything on the same plane. I'm not foolish enough to do that. But there is an understanding here that if we all work to our capacity and we find the things that we know how to do and we share them, then things can work better. So now all the way back. So when I called him, one of the things that's really good about Richard, and as far as being a financial, maven and an accountant and all, is that when I approached him on behalf of my wife to start a corporation, an S corporation, Michelle had been doing costumes for decades prior to my phone call to Richard. And one of the things that he helped make very easy, which is really important, is there's a little bit of a scare idea when you're going to start something and you're not on somebody else's W-2. Like, I get my fee, I take my money, I pay my taxes, and I'm done, and I don't want to talk about it. And I'm scared. Like, I don't want to learn something I don't know. Versus, because of his expertise and the familiarity that we established, that idea of starting and doing a little bit of the work and doing, recording all the transactions and not recording all the transactions that I learned later that I had to get somebody else to do that too. But the idea that, you can do it, and to take a little bit of a risk there, from my end was made so seamless by his engagement. And then, then we get to do like, the Myron Cohens and all that. And, and when you're an expert, as he is, I'll say I am, I'll say James, you are. When you know what you're doing, you can laugh in the middle of those things. When you don't know, you kind of stick to the script all the time and you're afraid to veer off. And so that's the same thing here. You got to find the holes in the Michigas. You got to find the holes in the day to be able to fill it. So there it is. But so thank you.
No.
All right.
No, very well said in both parts. Excellent. Said something, Rich, that you had mentioned. You all laugh more than you work. Can you just dig into that part of your rapport a little bit?
Yeah, the thing is with Dave. David is, I mean, he's wonderfully talented. He's incredibly talented, and he's just such a good natured guy. And from having met his mother, I can see where that came from, and he just brings that. And rather than being like suspecting or suspicious and feeling me out, he just dove right in. And it's almost like within a half an hour of meeting each other, we were like fast friends for life. It's like, where have you been all these years?
Well, all right. So I do a lot of things. Like my main gig is, of course, with counseling in schools, but I've been an actor and a screenwriter and all of that, and distrusted by my family to do that. By the way, until the New York Times said that I was brilliant, my father said, "You'll never make a living as an actor. Never. But pui. A park on the mishpucha, on the family. Forget it." So I had to get there. So anyway, so I'm also opening up an art show this weekend with my sculpture and my found art collages and stuff. So I sent a picture to my mother. I can hear her voice in the text. And it's very interesting, David. I'm not sure I know exactly what it means, but it's very interesting. Call me. It's Marcus's birthday. Doesn't understand my thinking, all that, but always supports. That's the beautiful thing. Always supports. First, she actually, one of these techniques, James, great technique for kids and for all. I'm always Mr. Techniques and all that, but it's called a compliment sandwich on a comment bread or something like that. Anyway, it goes like this: if you hear someone who gives you an idea, even if you hate the idea, find something good in what they shared. Then, so it's like, thank you. I appreciate your bringing that up. And have you considered? Not like, no, I don't like that. Let's move off from that. Let's go to the next one. Yes, and have you considered? And all of a sudden, they will say, "Oh, it was my idea, and I get to share it." And so that kind of a way of doing it. So my mother, I think, tends to do that naturally, although there's a little bit of the still, I don't know what day, David, I don't know. But anyway. So yeah, but mom is also a teacher in her own right. She never got to college, so she laments that. But she's a Holocaust survivor, so she goes around New York and beyond, and with Zoom way beyond. And she was a child in the war, so she gets to tell her story of survival to all young people. And wow. as she always says, especially the not Jewish ones, because she wants them to know what they went through, and she's constantly amazed. And she's very much on the positive side of things. She doesn't hold a grudge to what was done to her. And she's also open to ideas, as Richard, you said. She's still very curious. I was up with her the other week, and we actually got into a deep conversation. Because I'm doing a program on alternatives to violence right now. And it's based on a fascinating symbol of peace that is a permanent sculpture in front of the United Nations that's called the Knotted Gun. And it was made by an artist in commemoration and in honor of John Lennon's assassination. So it sits in front of the UN, and it's their international symbol of peace. In fact, this is what it looks like.
Oh, wow. Look at that. I like that.
And this becomes a canvas where in which kids or whoever puts their own colors and words and information on top of this. But I gave one of these to my mom for her to see and get engage with me as to what we're talking about, alternatives to violence. And we even got to a nuanced point because she has a very particular part of her story where, to survive in that environment of the war and the Holocaust, every moment is that miracle moment. So she was once on a truck that she had to talk her way off. And she talks
Wow.
about the kids that were kind of, outing her on the truck, and how could they do that? They didn't even know me. Why would they do that? And I said, I understand that, but let's turn it around for a moment. If you were one of those kids, might you have done that to that odd Jewish child for your own survival? Oh,
Mm.
David, I didn't think of that. You always come up with these things. I have to think about that. And that's true. Because, I mean, I want to be I would not be a collaborator if I was in Paris or whatever. I don't know. There are no atheists in foxholes. I don't know. I would like to believe that I was, and I think that motivates me all day, every day, is because I want to be able to confront that idea head on as much as I can when and if it ever comes to that. So,
Wow.
but anyway, I dig that
That's
I have a mom who I can still have these nuanced dialogues around, existentialism and the war and young people, and I'm bringing her to the Bronx workshop next week. So she's going to see the kids making these pieces, and they're going to love her. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome that she is still connecting to the youth, even multiple generations apart. That she feels that's very important, and I see where you get your motivation from with
Yeah.
that as well. Question about the youth, as someone that communicates with them, collaborates with them on a daily basis. What is the biggest issue or biggest two issues, whatever you feel strongly about, that you see in your experience facing the youth today?
I think, it's from my perspective is different from their perspective, but what I think I'm feeling from them is, um, it's a lot of things, but you're gonna go with me here. It's almost a lack of anonymity.
Hmm.
Like, when I have a kid, a son, he's not young. He's young. He's not a kid. He's 25. But when I tell him the stories that Richard and I grew up in, and the things we could get away with because there was no cameras, there was no cell phones, there was no internet, and we could just get into good trouble and
Yeah.
figure it out. And
Yeah.
now you kind of Orwellian, megalomania all day, every day. And so the kids don't lament their lack of anonymity. They don't know it. They never grew up in it. So it's not like they lack it. It's I'm seeing that. It's like they're not themselves. They have to become their third party selves all the time. So that's the one thing. And again, back to the other thing, it's very simple, really. What they need most, I don't know what they're lacking so much, is what they need most is to be heard. And that
Mm.
doesn't mean speaking. It could be speaking, but as an example, one of our counselors in the school today took us in the hallway, and she showed us one of the pieces that a kid made, a young person made, and it was outside in the hallway as as an exposed piece of art with a light and on it, and that voice that student was speaking so that we could hear that makes that kid happy. That makes that kid proud that they're able to, really see themselves being realized and being honored and heard. That's the most important thing. So often it's about, they're not being heard. I mean, I can't tell you, I over the years, when you're whatever business, you start moving away from the core work, especially in the educational field. You might be doing direct services, but then you become a director, and then you become a producer, and so you're getting pushed away from the day to day. And when you get back down to it, so in the last couple of weeks and months, I've been doing direct services to kids, and it's really empowering. And it's that the magic is in the taking off of the facade. And one of the exercises that we do, I'll be very specific. There's a practice called restorative justice, and it came out of the prison system. And it restorative justice is you work in circles. So immediately, it's almost like there's a fire. If there was a campfire in the middle, we would circle around the campfire and we'd all look together. That means that everyone's on the same plane. It's not like I'm the teacher and you're the student and I speak and you listen and all of that. And even the physical dynamic is not that. It's not like, on like a stage as I'm on and you're listening. It's a circle, so everybody's kind of equal and everyone's voice is heard regular. And, you set up a community agreements and you put a talking piece, meaning that if I'm holding the piece, do we agree that when I'm holding the piece, I'm speaking a reasonable amount of time? And then when you have the piece, you get the same permission to speak and I'll just listen. I'm not waiting to talk. So you come up with those kinds of community agreements. The next phase of that kind of work is bring in something of your own that has meaning to you that you can put in the middle of the circle. So all of a sudden, you're taking a piece of yourself and you're exposing yourself, a little bit of yourself, and adding to the community. Gentlemen, it's earth-shattering and beautiful. They open up and you hear them as human beings, as fully fledged, struggling, wonderful, crazy, teenage human beings with all of their issues, but you're out there. And it can be one young woman she brought in a song. And she took her laptop and she put on a Kendrick Lamar piece and she put the Kendrick Lamar piece into the circle. Another kid brought the keys to his car because he was not allowed to drive for many years because he had gotten screwed up on with the cops and he wasn't allowed. So he finally got the keys to it. He put the keys that meant so much to him in the middle. And you could see the joy in the kids, his whole gestalt changed because he was so proud that he could now drive and be that adult that he wanted to be. So those kinds of practices, and believe me, I do it with enthusiasm as I relate it to you, but these are wonderful practices that are going on all over, and it's really a thrill to share these ideas because it works. And all of the conceptions that we have of, public school, the violence, please get in there. See what's going on. Spend a minute. You would be amazed at the level of camaraderie and community and care that's going on. It's really remarkable, and I marvel at it all the time.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I can just kind of see it, visualize in my mind's eye. You explaining the circle and people putting things in the circle. That's a great idea. I may actually steal that one if I may. When I worked with youth, did you do it with older kids? Because most of the kids I work with are
You can
grades
do
11 and 12.
You can basically, it's sort of a natural idea. It's all, and the native idea is at the root of it, in the sense that they used to say when you're sitting around a fire like that's you're raising. We all raise our kids. I don't raise my son. We are raising the community. We're all watching each other all the time. And if I have 20 people in the circle, that means 20 people are taking care of the kid that I'm taking care of, not me. My responsibility starts to become the community responsibility. So there's a lot of energy in that and a lot of trust. And if someone leaves this, in fact, even to the point where like the principal walked in and the principal's natural instinct is to I'm going to sit back. I'm going to watch my kids. I'm in charge. He wanted to come into the circle. And I said, I got to tell you, sir, you got to ask the circle.
Yeah.
You got to, we have a trust circle here. You got to ask the circle. Okay. Of course they're going to let him in, do I not know that we have the authority? Of course we do. But you model the idea that no, we don't have the authority. You have to earn the authority. You don't get to be the boss because you have a tie on. It doesn't, yes, of course you do, but what are you doing with that? And so you have to really bring it there. and show what you mean and who you are. So anyway,
That's amazing. And growth wise, if I may ask one more question
yeah,
on counseling switch, growth wise, where do you see the program in 3 years and 5 years? Plan to go statewide, national? What are some of the plans going
It's
forward?
a very astute question relative to where, what we're talking about and where we are, because just today, like this one school, it's such a marvel, and yet it's so de rigueur. It's what they do. And I even said to the group, there was a board members there. I said, we really have to capture this. What more? I have a couple of documentaries that I've made about the program. But I want to capture this one as well, and I would like to see it grow. So there's a specific program, the one I've been telling you about, this Alternative to Violence Knotted Gun program, that Michelle, who set up this whole podcast, also, she and I talked about alternatives to violence in a different context, because that had to do with domestic abuse. But the idea that violence, gun violence, all violence, needs to be addressed, and you can do it from the perspective of strengths-based and peace, not, oh, how terrible and how bad, and it's a crisis. Of course, that's true. But growing the program, there is an opportunity to grow it. There's two filmmakers and professors at Michigan State University that just came in, and they've been documenting this Bronx program that I've been doing. And they've asked me to join them at Michigan State in the early fall, because they want to actually bring this knotted peace onto their campus as a symbol of peace and nonviolence, because Michigan State was one of those campuses that was had a mass shooting. So they want to bring this knotted peace as a symbol. And my offering there is, it's hard to just plop something down in the middle of the square and say, this knotted gun is a symbol of peace and now we're well. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to put it into context, and you have to workshops around it, and you have to make people own it the way that we're doing these little circles. So these things, I'm going to do that with other professors and teachers and students and grow it there and see where it goes. So CIS, it's a very, we can't field all the calls that we get right now. Back to Richard's point. I mean, funding, we get contracts and we do the work that we do. But we, as a nonprofit that's not a city program, is very difficult financially, because the city actually pays social workers at a higher rate than we can. And they have all the benefits. So we have to offer the services that we do and keep employees, and that's not easy. And we also, any extra funding that we get, we can stay in school as long as we can. We get, at this point, a lot of our programs, the funding ends and we have to end. Versus if we had private funding, we could stay on and see these kids all the way through, let's say, 4 years of high school, whatever. So that's an important point. So we are starting to hit the national stage. We have been on some, Atlantic monthly conversations and written some op-eds recently. So it is a big endeavor to go outside of New York, because every municipality has their own rules.
That's true.
And the
That's true.
Department of Education is its own animal. And then you have to learn Philadelphia's animal, or, Los Angeles' animal, or whatever. But I would say that our holistic approach, and from a healing-based perspective, is worthy of proliferation. It's worthy of sharing. And so I would certainly like to do that. And one of the areas, James, to answer your call directly, is that we're doing a lot more training of teachers and professional learning. So the more we do that, then the people who live with the students every day can continue that work. So that's where we're at.
Love it.
Oh, Richard, why don't you tell us a Myron Cohn joke?
No way, not as well as you do. I wouldn't want the people who are watching this to be cheated by me. I don't do it justice.
Should I do one? Should I do with the 30-second one?
Go for it.
All right, the 30-second one is, there's a fellow who has been taking care of his father all his life. And, his father's getting on in years, and he finally decided to put him into a big condominium in Florida. Beautiful apartment, high-rise floor, beautiful view. And he walks in and he visits his dad almost every night. And he walks into the condo one night and he sees his dad, and his dad is watching basketball. Basketball. He never watched basketball a day in his life. So he said, Dad, what's the score? He said, 87-69. I said, really? Who's winning? 87.
I like it. I like it.
Thank God you delivered that, David, because I
On the spot, you were worried that I was going to screw it up, right? Sure.
No, that was very good. That's a good place to semi end it. I want to end it on the proper note. And can you, David, explain where to find CIS social media website? Just get the word out as much as possible to support.
So it's counselinginschools.org, straight website, and then we're out on all the social media handles: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's all there. Hope and healing. Our event is called Measures of Hope. That's where we honored Ron Carter last year with the Measures of Hope Award. Oh, by the way, that was another thing that Richard. I mean, he loves me to death, but one of the things he really wanted last year, and if you recall. John Baptiste is a major talent and a major mensch. And he was a student of Ron Carter's. So he was going to give the Measures of Hope Award to Ron Carter last year. And Richard actually said, I loved your work. I'm supporting either way, but I got to meet this guy. Because you really do want to shake that kind of angel's hand. I mean, he's touched by an angel. He's got the spirit, and he was so generous with us. COVID got in the way, so he could only do it. He gave Ron the award via a taped video, but he was a friend, and so that was great. So Measures of Hope, Counseling in Schools. You can find us on all those platforms. Please, there's support, there's opportunity to support, there's opportunity to get involved. I just launched this week. One of the great things, Richard was at the event. One of the great ways that we have raised some funds, considerable funds, is through the generosity of artists. Anne Craven, AWOL Ariscu, Forrest Kirk. They just gave us their art for us to raise funds on them. And so they have agreed to join an artists advocacy committee, which again shows, James, we started this conversation that this is not, the education needs all the parts of it, arts and all of that. And when you have those kind of advocacy from all different angles, and even from, not even, because that's not even fair, but all angles, the fiduciary angle, the sports angle, the entertainment angle, you measure a society by how you treat your children. I mean, let's do that. So how are we treating our kids? And our work really, it's kind of vital to humane treatment of our youth. And so the more we get support in that, the better we're all going to be.
Love it. So please support Counseling in Schools. Our producer, Michelle, is going to put all the information in the show notes that David mentioned. And tremendous having you on. Again, as a father of a 5 and 6 year old, just how we treat our youth is very important to me. I have a very laser focus on that just in my own family, but, also working with youth to see it out. So thank you so much for all you do, David. It's been tremendous. And Rich, thanks for joining in and recommending David to come on the podcast, but also joining the podcast, which I didn't know until today that you were coming on. But it's great to hear. Great to see you here.
Well, I'm thank you so much for having me, James. I'm sorry that I was a couple minutes late. Next time, David and I are going to do our routine. Probably take the better part of an hour.
We have to get all the formalities out of the way, and then we could just. He took me. What a gift! He took me to a nice Jewish deli a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't had a corned beef and pastrami like that. It was back in the Brooklyn days. It was beautiful.
Nice.
And we laughed. We ate and we laughed.
And Richard, I know how hard you work. So if you say you laugh more than you work, I can't imagine how much you laugh because you work very hard.
Thank you,
Ilu
James.
Hoti from New Jersey, Jayeno.
What a,
All right, man. James, you're
Excellent.
wonderful. Great spirit. I wish you well as well. Thanks for having us, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have a question related to this episode or have a request for what you would like to hear, please email us at marketing@adeptuscpas.com. You can also find us at adeptuscpas.com online or follow us at Adeptus on social media. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.